Hey everybody, it's Kathy Bosco from Rethink.fm, the forward-thinking podcast about experience design. Join me and special guests to discuss effective design, technology, and the intersection of helping people and entrepreneurship. From user experience research to product roadmaps, we've got you covered. We've all got questions, so let's get started. Today, my special guest is Sarah Fruy. She's got over 20 years of experience in leading B2B marketing, SaaS, ad tech, and is shifting to becoming a fractional CMO. Sarah has supported 2 companies to reach 100 million ARR and profitability, and has been the first head of marketing at 2 startups acquired by Walmart and AAA. She has started her own consultancy, Renaissance Marketing, to help other businesses scale up. You won't want to miss this conversation. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for sitting down to chat with me today. Could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sarah Fruy. I have about 20 years of experience as a marketing leader. I've primarily worked in B2B SaaS, ad tech, and I've really focused my career on becoming a generalist. So I've worked in all different functions from like product marketing to partner marketing, managing websites. I've led 7 rebrands, supported 2 companies to get to 100 million in ARR and profitability, as well as unicorn status. I also was the first head of marketing at 2 startups that got acquired by Walmart and AAA. And so I have a lot of experience with scaling companies. And at this point, I have kind of shifted gears and turned into a fractional CMO. And I started my own consultancy called Resonance Marketing to really help other businesses scale up and achieve similar results to the other companies I've supported throughout my career. So I'm really excited to be here. And I've also worked with Kathy in the past, so huge fan of hers.
Yeah, that's right. We worked together as I was really beginning to, I had already started to super focus on UX research from product design. So people end up in UX research either via being a PhD and having research skills and applying that to different industries, or often product designers will further specialize into UX research. And that's sort of the route I took. And we did have the good fortune of working together on a big scaling project, and it was wonderful. So I'm so glad you can share some of your experiences here today. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about personalization, because for me, that has been something from a research perspective, like, well, is it useful in a SaaS platform? Is it creepy in a SaaS platform? Like, could you talk a little bit about your experience and recommendations with personalization?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about personalization and really like any kind of new initiative and in an organization, it's what does the framework look like to begin with? Like what is the foundation that you're building upon? And so to do personalization well, some of the things that you need to have in place are really good data, being able to pull data from multiple systems, good data hygiene, and content that's scalable and that can be personalized. So if those things aren't in place, like those are the foundations that you really need to think about is like, what's your core messaging? So for example, like I work with a lot of enterprise companies that have or an enterprise offering and there's a sales team. So we have a pitch deck. So you don't have 20 pitch decks to start, right? You start with one pitch deck, you get that general presentation down, and then we start to personalize it for different personas. So you start to break it out by industry or jobs function, different things like that. And that's how I start to kind of like break those things down. I take a similar approach to websites. So having that core messaging down, that core user journey strategy down, and then thinking about, okay, what are like the top 3 personas or verticals or segments that I want to personalize this space for? And then I start to carve those journeys out and then scale it from there. And so it really, for me, always begins with having a good foundation and then figuring out ways to prioritize the most effective content for personalization that can be done effectively with the right data.
And what do you find to be the best? Say you have all that foundation. You live in a beautiful world where data is clean and trusted and useful, and you have all this foundation work. Uh, is the purpose for growth primarily, or expansion, or like what is the top purposes for using personalization?
I think it really depends on your business goals, right? Like you could be using personalization for customer acquisition and thinking about how can I make that user feel like you have landed on like the perfect website, the perfect collateral, the perfect ad that speaks to me as an individual and so that I feel like you're meeting my needs. Or are you looking for like growth with your current customer base? And so are you trying to expand them into new product lines? Upsell into certain like services that you might provide, things like that. And so it really comes down to your KPIs for your team and the business goals that you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to get out of that personalization. It might also just be relationship building and like making sure that your customers feel that like you understand them as a person and that you appreciate them and value them and you see what they're doing on your platform and are giving them helpful suggestions to make them successful. Like that's another goal that could be outside of just revenue growth. And so it really comes down to your business needs and mapping that personalization strategy to your goals.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And I have a lot of questions about personalization. Um, when you are thinking about using personalization as a communications uh, method, what are the touch points available to you? Is it email campaigns? Is it landing on marketing websites? Like, what are the different touch points or channels that you can leverage through personalization?
Yeah, I think for that, it's always like the opportunities are very vast, and I think it's really being focused and looking at some of your existing data of like what channels are the most successful, where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck and the effort that you have. And so I think email is a great opportunity to think about personalization. It doesn't necessarily mean like more is better. Like I think creating really specific messages to individuals that is better than just constantly blasting a bunch of different messages to different people. And then also like knowing when to personalize and when a general message is okay. Like sometimes having a general announcement is totally fine, and it can be a little bit overkill to waste your time trying to personalize things. And then other times, if you have a general message and then just tweaking it by like industry and job title and these little indicators that show like your customer, your user, your prospect that they feel seen, and that it's meant for them can be really helpful. And then thinking about like downstream. So if it's an email campaign, are you having a link to the website, making sure that that landing page is consistent with the email marketing? Can you personalize that landing page? A lot of it can be rinse and repeat. You have one template and then you just sort of like switch out the visuals, some of the language so that you're speaking in their format that makes sense to them versus, using general language that can apply to anyone
Mhm.
and making that journey consistent. I think there are some people, you think one step and then you don't think it all the way through, and just making sure that that whole journey is consistent. And if you can't, be really mindful about how you're shifting that personalization to a more generalized approach based on, constraints and resources and things like that. But you don't want to be using something and then all of a sudden there's like a big shift and then that feels inconsistent and incongruent. You sort of lose that relationship that you've built through those personalization tools.
Yeah, it can fall apart in a dramatic way if you're not really careful about the nurturing journey that you're creating throughout. Yeah, that makes good sense. Um, is this a big request you're seeing now as you're embedded with different organizations? I know everybody's really focused on AI, but I'm
Yeah, I think it's just we've gotten to a point where a lot of customers sort of expect personalization to a certain degree, and to not deliver that, it feels, like someone else is going to take advantage of that moment. And so it does require like a lot of research. AI, I think, can be really helpful. Like, for example, when I was at Pantheon years ago, I was building a chatbot program on the website, and that was 100% manual at the time. Like all the experiments we were running, all of the language that we were using, all the content recommendation, that was coming from individual team members, us writing out scripts, writing out all of these like if then scenarios with the chatbots. And now AI can like cut that production timeline down to like significantly to make a lot of that more automated. Content recommendations. I mean, years ago, I would be going onto the blog and pulling out specific articles at the bottom to recommend to people. Same thing with landing pages and suggesting case studies. And AI can automate a lot of that now. They can also make it really dynamic, which is exciting. And so some of these things that were really helpful, but took a lot of time, AI is alleviating that. So you can think more creatively, more strategically, like rather than pushing buttons and moving these assets around on the website to create personalization. Now you can automate a lot of that and then refocus your energy on like what's the best content I can create so that this feels even more unique and more special to the users that are coming here, and shifting that energy and that creative focus. Like that's one of the things that I have really enjoyed about like AI adoption and being able to automate some of these personalized journeys.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, right? And I think those of us who were had our sleeves rolled up going through the manual work just a few years ago, really, can really appreciate that.
Yeah,
So
especially
thank
like
you.
lingo, like I worked with a company called Rockbot for a while where our audience was anyone with a brick and mortar business. And so that's huge when you think about personalizing journeys for all these different, even like the restaurant industry, for example, like you could say, oh, that's like one industry, like one focus. Well, there's like high end, like Michelin star restaurants all the way down to QSR. You're not talking to them in the same way. They're not experiencing the website in the same way, or your collateral or your email marketing, even within the same vertical. And so to be able to even like segment that down so that the Michelin star restaurant feels like this message is for them versus the QSR restaurant where there's thousands of them that you're speaking to and you're dealing with owner operators versus, an individual like chef owner. Those things can be really like nuanced and specialized through AI with a lot of automation in a way that like I can go in and say, hey, I'm not an expert in this, but what's some of the language that would make it feel native to them? And it cuts down on that research cycle and helps you scale a lot faster, which I think is really exciting too. I think the big thing with AI is just don't automate your thought, like learn along the way. Don't just kind of like trust the AI. I still feel like it's important to read the articles and teach yourself the lingo, understand those communities inside and out so that you're speaking to them authentically and not just sort of like regurgitating what's been sort of sucked off the web, but really being thoughtful about that approach. Because if you aren't authentic, the audience is going to see through you pretty quickly, and that is going to create a big, huge disconnect. And that's where personalization can kind of go off the rails a bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's really easy to tell, for us in the inside industry, but people who aren't even in the industry can sense when something's like from a person as opposed to generated AI content. I mean, it just immediately hits them as uh less warm, just less warm. Uh, I wanted to ask you about value proposition because I think LLM AI models are great at what you just described, giving you the language people use, or how would someone think, give me some versions of how a person in this role might do something. You can choose versions. I always like to edit the responses I get too because it helps me like internalize the knowledge a little bit better than just copy and pasting it over. If I copy and paste it over, I just won't even remember I did it before. Not
Right.
okay, So it's like my brain is so stupid. So sometimes editing things that I get from AI helps me have some cognitive recollection of the work as well. I'm wondering how if you're using AI and how you might be or not be in terms of value proposition. Does it help unlock value proposition? How are you, and maybe you're still experimenting, I don't know, but can you talk a little bit about value proposition and AI work through the marketing lens?
Yeah, I mean, I think one lens that I think about AI just in general when it comes to content creation is like you get what you put into it out of it. So if you're talking to it from like an uninformed place, you're going to get uninformed answers. If you do a lot of research up front, if you know the things that you're trying to understand better, you're going to give it a better prompt. You're going to give it more context, just like as if you were dealing with like an internal employee. So if I'm talking to a junior staff member and I only give them a small bit of information, they're not going to give me a better deliverable. They're going to give me whatever they can based on that like limited information. It's like not inviting people to meetings and things like that. And so the more context you can give your AI tool, the better results you're going to get. And so that's collecting data, doing the research yourself, knowing the right questions to ask, and then getting that feedback out. And so I don't like sometimes I use AI to help me as a thought starter, but a lot of times when I'm creating like a bigger project, like that kind of messaging, I'll go in there and put my thoughts down. Like here's what I think are the value propositions. What am I missing? Help me think of this from different angles. And so it's less of a content partner and more of like a thought partner to sort of like challenge some of the biases, help you explore your ideas, sort of be like a devil's advocate and things like that. And then, it's important to also like don't eliminate that peer review. I think a lot of people are starting to think of AI as like, oh, this is like my gut check. I'm going to run it through there and then I can just go and clean it up. Like there's still value in peer review and pulling in different team members from different departments, talking to customers, making sure you're getting like humans outside of yourself, outside of the tool to look at this stuff and sort of validate some of these things and really prove it out. But I think when it comes to value propositions, the biggest unlocks I've gotten have not necessarily been from AI, but it's been from customer interviews and customer research and hearing from them and getting those aha moments there, and then sort of expanding and validating that through additional, AI learnings and stuff. But it really comes from the customer, not from the tool, to get the most impact, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Underlining strongly, like talk to customers, talk to people, have them show you how they're trying to accomplish a task in your software or in your website too, because once they're showing you something, you're getting a lot more than them just telling you something because it triggers all kinds of conversation and insights that you wouldn't get otherwise. So I find that to be critical. And most of all the qualitative interviews I do include a show me how you would pick part of the research study. And it's always really valuable. So I agree completely. I,
Yeah, one thing I've found really interesting working in the B2B SaaS space is quite often you have like this small segment of power users that are using your platform differently than everyone else, and they're spending way more money to do that. And if you aren't paying attention, you're just thinking like big picture, broad, like what's the biggest product market fit that I can possibly have, and you aren't thinking about these niche use cases and how you can sort of exploit that. I mean, it can be like a whole new product line for some businesses. And so sort of like uncovering that, that's like AI can help with that, but a lot of that also is like communicating with product and understanding your users and even working with finance of like, what's going on over there? Like, why do we have this huge bill from this one person? Like, what are they doing differently than everybody else? To sort of like uncover new opportunities to drive revenue and expand the use cases for your product.
yeah, it's definitely a team sport. Getting insights from finance, is the organization easy to do business with or not? Do we ask that often enough? Do we measure an entire billing cycle as part of our evaluation? I think that's really important. And then, support teams. What's the chatbot answering? What are people helping with? Is it because our customer base is really proactive in trying to do things and wants help, or is it because we made it impossible for people to do things on their own and they need extra support? Like understanding that those fundamentals and sales teams, they know what problems people expect our platforms to solve for their customers, for our customers too. So it's definitely a team sport. I'm glad you brought up the finance part because I often leave that out in my conversations, and I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Keep that one really up.
I've gotten a lot of insights from the finance team. That was a big unlock from years ago is making good relationships there. And it's not just like sending in your expenses and making sure that like all of the, budgets are in alignment, but also looking at customer use cases and things like that can be really insightful.
Yeah. So what are some of your, biggest wins and challenges lately? I haven't seen you in quite a while. It's been a few years and AI's come on the scene and, you're just such an impactful collaborator, leader for organizations. What have been some of your recent wins and challenges, Sarah?
Um, on the win side, I would say I've been really embracing AI and helping people with that adoption and finding ways to sort of um, take busy work off of their plates and free people up for more creative work. I think that that's one of the things that's really amazing about AI. I think a lot of people look at all of like the slop that's out there, and that's something that I think that people who aren't thinking are creating. But for folks that are really automating some of the busy work and being able to operate at a higher level, like that gets me really excited. That's something that I've personally just been enjoying. Like every time I have this moment where I get to take something off my plate that I don't like that's amazing. Like that I get really jazzed about that. And when I can bring those insights into organizations I'm working with, I get really excited about that too. And I think the stuff that I have found like frustrating lately is sort of like the opposite side of that is people like not doing the work, not putting in the effort and just sort of like copying and pasting. And then there's a lot of this just like extra effort to like correct that behavior. Um, I think that uh, as far as creating better workflows, you have to be really mindful of how you're using it and what tools you're using and keep experimenting and not just sort of like hit the easy button. So those are some of the frustrations that I have, I think, are people sort of like offloading their thought process to AI, and the opposite is once they can offload the things that don't require thinking and think more creatively and strategically, those are the big aha moments that get me energized.
Yeah, yeah. That makes me excited too, when we can eliminate busy work and be more creative. I think aligning with what's really the business feasibility of AI is also a challenge. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, like the business models for implementing AI into tools or workflows or products for end users is still kind of uncertain. Like we don't really know what that's going to cost, and yet we're selling it. So I worry about that a little bit. I worry about um, people's rights for their what's the term? You have rights over your own writing
Like
and
copyrights,
yeah, copyright
hmm
violations
intellectual
and
property stuff. Yeah.
IP, yeah,
Yeah.
intellectual property. I worry a little bit about that too. Um, and I know it's not reliable. Like some tools are more reliable and consistent in what they produce, but the hallucinations, not everything needs to be 100% reliable. I just need some suggestions from AI on the metadata for this open graph image that I'm sharing with a blog post. Like, I don't need it to be 100% accurate, and that's okay. But how do we measure those things and know those things? So there's still so much in terms of users' needs around AI that are kind of all over the place, and the business, of AI and the business models are still undefined.
Mhm.
So it's just crazy period of time, but I use it all the time to make my language and writing more concise. I'm slightly dyslexic, so imagine what a great tool this is for someone who's dyslexic and wants to speak with brevity and be concise and not give research that's like 5 pages long to people to have to read. And so it's really been critical for me in my profession as well. And the creativity part, I think, is people underestimate the value of that. I think
Mhm.
the creativity that it unlocks is going to propel our industry to be surprising, and the next big things are going to be very creative, and this is going to afford us to do the next new things we can't even imagine right now because we've unlocked a certain creative potential in human innovation in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I manage a lot of designers in my work, and before it was a lot of me sort of like telling people like, "Oh, this is what's in my head. Can you make it a reality?" And now I can go in and I can start to prompt things, and I can get the ideas out of my head to direct people better, and then have them upload that, up level that, and make it more on brand and more consistent with like other imagery and other materials that we have within our communication strategy. And like that's been a big unlock for me and really exciting. Like being able to like iterate a lot faster. Sometimes you go through these design cycles that can take weeks. And now like that same exercise is taking like a day and I can get to done way quicker. And then all of a sudden we can start to like going back to the personalization thing,
Yeah.
rather than just having like one version of that creative, we can have like 20 versions of that creative, to make that more specific for the different personas that we're trying to reach. I think with like the AI stuff, the video I think is really interesting because there's so many ways that people are sort of like mimicking themselves, and I see pluses and minuses to it. Like on one hand, like I primarily speak English. I barely speak German as a second language. I studied it in high school, but if you don't use it, you lose it. But I mean, when you think about translating like content that you're creating into multiple languages through AI, like that's a wonderful unlock. But I have also heard of people like creating AI avatars for themselves and then selling that content as like a trainer or different things like that. And it's just like, why is someone going to pay you as a trainer or a coach or whatever if you can't even take the time to show up and film yourself? You know, and so then you're like you're disconnecting from your audience in that way. And so I think it's being really mindful of how and when you're using these tools to your advantage. Like I think a great use case is sort of like internal training videos, creating an avatar for that, throwing in a script and spitting that out and getting team members up to speed really quickly. But then thinking about how are you communicating with a customer? Maybe that does require a Zoom call or something like that in a more personalized, human-centric approach. And just knowing sort of like the nuance there in terms of like when do you use these tools to speed up the process, but when is it more important to have that connection, and that real moment so it's not off-putting and you feel like again like you're hitting that easy button or you're not putting in the effort to win that person over and deepen that relationship and keep them coming back to your brand or your business or your service.
Hmm. Yeah, the easy button is gonna stick with me. Thank you for that metaphor. I'll have that from in my pocket forever now. I love that. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see the different use cases. I think your idea of employee onboarding and stuff like that, having AI help with that, that is a really good use case. Um, I haven't experienced it, but I have experimented with a lot of research tools. Sometimes it's a synthetic user doing the interview, and you could talk to that synthetic, a CEO could be driving down the street and say, "Oh, I've got this great idea. Let me ask my synthetic user what they think about this, this, and this." And it can be very disruptive to actual like decision making. So I'm not a big fan of the synthetic people or users or avatars in that setting. I
Mhm.
haven't got a good use case for that, but it can be useful in, it's like I'm seeing surveys and user interviews merge.
Mhm.
Like you can do a survey with a synthetic user or synthetic persona conducting it verbally. You don't have to type it in. It can be very interactive. Those are pretty interesting, but it's I guess I have a bias that I don't love surveys. I prefer data and qualitative work and structured and qualitative work, structured data and qualitative work to come together. But even when you're writing up these interviews that these IA agents are going to be conducting, and you give them to people, people don't mind. They're
Mhm.
fine with it. And in some ways, you might be actually stripping out some bias. Like
Yeah.
they know that the avatar that's talking to them didn't design whatever they're evaluating for you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's just a whole new world. These tools that have been coming on the market in UXR, I mean, there's hundreds of them that have come on the market in the last year or so, and they're not all going to be here
Right.
a year from now. So it's kind of how do you decide what tools to use?
No,
How do
I think
you
that's super
decide?
important right now because especially at the pace that AI is evolving, there's a lot of companies that within the next couple of years, will be replaced by a prompt.
Yeah,
And that's a whole work crew that's getting like wiped out, an entire business model. But on the other hand, I think that there's going to be tons of businesses that are going to be created as a result of this stuff too. So I'm trying to be optimistic that those things will balance out. Um, but yeah, the user testing stuff I think is really interesting with the AI avatars asking the questions. again, like I just feel like in my career, talking to customers has been so helpful to me. And like sometimes just reading that body language and saying, like, like I feel like with an avatar, they're just going to go through a script and there's value in that at scale, right?
Right.
But depending on what you're trying to accomplish, like with a case study or something like that, there might be a double click in there where you start to ask questions that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And at some point, the AI is probably going to be able to sort
They're
of like
doing that
pivot.
too.
Yeah.
They're doing it too, but it feels very out of control. Like, oh my gosh, okay, they went down this avenue, and I might not have as the
Right.
facilitator
I
of
mean, you
that
think about how
conversation.
much time you spend approving questions for a survey, and then to give that trust over to an AI that is maybe unsupervised in this context. I don't know. The possibility for error for me still is a big caution. I would really hesitate there.
I
But
agree.
also being able to like conduct interviews in different time zones and things like that, and be able to talk to people, like that's a way to increase your awareness, especially if you're a global company with resources that you might not have if you're US based or something. And so there is a lot of like two sides to all of this in terms of like what it can unlock and some of like having good guardrails, I think is something that I always sort of like try and coach people on.
Mhm.
I think is really essential right now in AI. I think that some people trust it too much, some people don't trust it enough. But like working within your organization to have really clear guidelines, really clear use cases, and ways to sort of dial things back and reverse course if you need to, uh, if things can go awry and you get hallucinations or behaviors that you're not comfortable with. But testing and guide rails, I think, are essential when it comes to AI, especially when you're dealing with like customer facing situations.
Do most of the companies you work with have those guardrails and policies and governance in place, or is that something that people are still standing up?
I think a lot of people are still working on it. The larger companies, they'll have like AI governance councils and things like that that are really established, and lawyers and things like that are involved. At the startup phase, people move really fast, and sometimes it's very like retroactive of like, oh, this happened, so now we have a policy.
Yeah.
Um, and so trying to get ahead of that, like I see a lot of folks nowadays sort of like, getting excited about agentic AI and connecting all these systems. And that to me, I get a little anxiety about that of like how much information are you releasing? Like we don't know about like potential hacking in the future, like data leaks and things like that. And so you just need to be really cautious and mindful. And then also just like you can have policies and then people can go on their personal ChatGPTs or whatever they have at home. And like that's a thing that people are doing. Like we can't just pretend that because you have a company policy, people aren't going around and trying to do these things on their own. And, that's also scary. And so just trying to make people feel really accountable and in alignment and understanding like the risks involved, I think is really important when it comes to AI usage and being compliant and keeping people and your customers safe.
Yeah. Big thing about safety and trust. Amazing. Thank you for sharing all that you're seeing. I really appreciate your perspective. Now, if someone wants to work with you or get in touch with you, what's the best way?
I'm really active on LinkedIn. I think, the only Sarah Fruy in the world. I've never found anyone else with my name. So if you look me up, you can find me on LinkedIn. And then I also have a website, sarahfruy.com. Happy to do like a free 30-minute consultation if you have something you're trying to work through. But yeah, I love working with early stage B2B companies on their growth strategy, and happy to help whoever could use a little bit of extra marketing support.
Oh, that's amazing. And I can testify you will get a lot of value from a 30-minute call with you, Sarah. And I want to spell your last name Fruy, not
Yes.
Fury, because the
Yes.
dyslexic people
I'm
here
not the
need that.
superhero.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing what you're experimenting with and some of the things you're using to make big impact with growing customer bases and things like that. Uh, I really appreciate your time and come talk again and let us know where you're at in a few months.
Awesome. This is really fun. It was great to reconnect with you.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye bye.
Take care.